From reviews to rankings, The Big Picture is all things movies. From in-depth analysis of the latest flick to sit-down interviews with some of the biggest movie stars and filmmakers on the planet, Sean Fennessy and Amanda Dobbins have got you covered. Check out The Big Picture on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode is brought to you by Anytime Fitness. We may talk a whole lot about sports, but when it comes to keeping fit ourselves, there's definitely room for improvement. I hit this point early July. I was just like, I am not in good enough shape. I started trying to walk at least 15,000 steps a day or hiking or just anything to keep my legs moving. Now it's the end of 2023. I feel great. I had a physical 3 weeks ago and the guy was like, you're doing great. You're doing better than you were 3 years ago. I felt great. Whatever your goals are, progress is possible thanks to Anytime Fitness. Get a personalized plan and support from an expert coach anytime, anywhere. Visit anytimefitness.com to try Anytime Fitness for free. Start to train for your life. Terms, conditions, and restrictions apply. See website for details.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day. And that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
I need support staff to clear the room. Stand up and walk now.
Hello and welcome to The Watch. My name is Chris Ryan and I am an editor at TheRinger.com, and joining me on the other line, the Panic Meister cooking up his sweaty spaghetti. It's Andy Greenwald.
I gotta ask you before we start, do you need me to hold the scepter?
Oh my God.
Do you need me to?
Oh, Andy, what's going on? We're here. It's Sunday night. We're here to talk to you about the most recent episode of Succession. We finally got our Super Bowl, the shareholders meeting. Greenwald, we can jump in here. I thought that this was, subtly a slapstick episode of Succession. A lot of running from one room to another, a lot of jumping on the phone, a lot of kind of slipping on the old, maybe metaphorical banana peels, going a little piss mad. And it kind of reminded me of the early, like immediately post-stroke Logan episodes of Succession. It was
right.
I actually thought that the some of the one-liners were like self-consciously strained because of the amount of strain that the characters were under. Because obviously this was a very like definitive day for these characters. What'd you think of the episode? I believe it was called The Retired Farmers of Idaho or something.
I love. First of all, I think you've made a great observation, because I think that's a sign of familiarity with a show and writers' familiarity with the characters, that there is A+ Roman Roy one-liners when he is feeling good, when he's feeling confident, when Jerry's given him a loving motherly stare. And then there is B- C+, I'm actually having a nervous breakdown, even though it's not cool to have a nervous breakdown, Roman Roy scatological insults. And those land in a different way. And we got more of that in this episode. I was thrilled. It's interesting you say it reminded you of early Succession. I think that in some ways I agree with you. In other ways, I think it could only be later Succession, because when you are orchestrating and conducting a symphony orchestra like this at such a high pitch, the mastery of each instrument really matters. So, just the little things that help sustain the episode, even, and carry you through its often frantic tone, are the little things like, oh, what's Carl going to actually do here? Well, of course he's going to take the cowardly way out and put it on Frank. Like those little beats of familiarity and knowledge are what carries us through. What it reminded me of, and this is no less of a compliment, I think, it reminded me of the last act of Michael Clayton. Like I just feel like Tilda Swinton washing the pits in the hotel bathroom core was that rich, heady aroma was suffused through this episode. There is something so just titanically shitty in the best possible way for the fates of nations to be decided by dopes in pleated suits with lanyards in Midtown hotels. Like just the absolute soul-killing anodyne mise-en-scène of the episode was tremendous. And it was, again, like this was probably because of all the isolated spaces, shouts to the COVID coordinator, but also it made sense. You
Sure.
know what I mean? Like, this was the perfect place for such an insane episode for it to take place in.
So, it's a criticism that's levied at Succession. It's a question that's levied at Succession, which is, are these good people? Which we know they're not. But this episode actually asked a somewhat newer question, which is, are these people bad at their jobs? Which I think it was kind of fascinating to watch. Even someone like, say, the Stewie character, who always has the right thing to say, is always impeccably dressed, is always sniffing at the rosemary after the perfect bite of cheese, has always the best burns of Kendall. And when you finally get behind the velvet rope into the VIP section, you've got a vegetable in a wheelchair in Sandy, his daughter, who is either listening to him or pretending to listen to him.
Also named Sandy.
Yeah.
Just
right.
Bravo.
And Stewie, who is like, I don't really have any control here. Like, I don't want us to go to a vote, but as Kendall points out, that side of things is their finances are unstable, and if it's an increasingly expensive negotiation, and he doesn't really have anything to contribute when it really gets down to like what Sandy wants versus what Logan wants. It's only those two people that matter. So everyone else is spinning like a top, trying to make just a little bit more sunlight hit them on their way down.
It's such the show is many things, but it is consistently such a brilliant and savage indictment of the meritocracy myth in America, or certainly in global capitalism. And I think that what we saw really reflected in this episode is, look, Logan is exceptionally good at being what he is and has been, and has an impeccable track record of fighting and stabbing and backstabbing and clawing his way to the absolute top of the global media food chain. He is a mean, savage bastard, right? And that would be a point of pride for him. And he clawed himself out of Dundee, Scotland, and he did all of this.
Mm-hmm.
All of those billions of dollars he built. He made that. There is no one else in his orbit that has made anything. Tom hasn't even made toilet wine.
Right.
And I'm not going to that place of like, well, unless you make unless you make something with your own hands in your wood shop, you are not a competent person. But that
you and I work in a wood shop in a way
of ideas. The forge is just the brain pan
for tradesmen.
Totally. Takesman. The scramble to find purchase when their only ground is taken away from them was what was so incredible. The way everyone's scattered like bugs. Basically, the sudden realization that maybe Logan doesn't know what he's saying, that maybe he is non.
And how long has he been piss mad for?
And how long has it been? Because they are willing to do anything and take any risk as long as he's there. And that moment afterwards when they're just absolutely white-face petrified at what they're going to do without him, and it's not just in that A plot. I think that the very smartly observed and very cleverly inserted B, or at this point C plot of Greg and Grandpa, the best grampers in the world. Not a hugger.
No.
Not a hugger is our Uncle Ewan. When he's basically like, I don't like what this has done to you, what's metastasized inside of you. I'm giving my money to Greenpeace. And that's maybe a good choice. I feel like that's maybe fine. I think that's probably okay. They don't know what to do with everything they've inherited, and other than protect it, and for what end?
I can run through the plot recap of this episode in case people just want to hear it laid out for them. It's the big day, the Waystar Royco shareholders meeting, and the final showdown between the various factions of the Roy family and the insurgent investor group led by Sandy and Stewie. The two sides are negotiating a settlement, but can't agree on certain concessions, including board seats, private jet usage, familial succession plans. Sandy is in a near vegetative state, so his daughter is conducting the negotiations for him along with Stewie, and there's a nice symmetry between two ailing fathers and two upstart daughters here. As the day winds on, there are casualties, including Kendall's rabbit, Logan's urethra, Greg's inheritance, and Shiv's career prospects. That doesn't even get into the nitty gritty of each scene, but that is essentially what happened in this episode.
I do want to pause just for a moment to say that one of the things that I'm realizing is that by recording early, because you and I are talking about this episode that we've seen early, we're recording Friday. You will be listening to this Sunday night or Monday or even Tuesday. We are ahead of the discourse, yes, but we are also ahead of the fact checking. And so, for example, last week you and I had a good bit of fun playing Where in the World is
Josh
Adrian
Aronson.
Brody's sweater vest. And thank you to literally everyone on the internet for sending us the information. It was started as a trickle and ended up as a raging stream. Shouts to Logan's urethra.
People just want to be helpful.
That's the thing about the internet. I appreciate that. But what I wanted to say was, for example, I am genuinely curious about Larry Pine's health and well-being and condition in playing this part. Beloved theater actor, love him on the show. I imagine that there will be articles out Sunday night being like, Larry Pine was ailing, or they chose to put him in this direction, or something. We don't know the answer to that. So I'm just throwing that out there. No need to tweet at us the answer. We will find it, but I am curious.
Yeah, that's a good point. We can talk about the Sandy and Stewie of it all, but I thought maybe we could start with a conversation about Shiv, because I think this has been a bad 2 weeks for her. It's been a tough 2 weeks for her, as just as she was installed at the beginning of the season into this role as Logan's eyes and ears and the real sort of head of the company outside of Jerry. The last episode, she gets carved out of a couple of meetings, of a couple of calls. She seems to overreach a bit and get pushed back by Logan. And then in this episode, she does a lot of maneuvering and a lot of work. And then Logan essentially humiliates her in front of everybody and sort of bats away the idea that she would get a board seat here. What did you think of this week in terms of how it worked out for Shiv?
It's been a brutal run, and I think it's been a fascinating choice by the show. I think we talked about this in the season premiere, that anyone tuning into the pilot a couple of years ago might have assumed that the show would have been lazier than it is, and how, the young woman is actually the smartest and the most capable and is being overlooked by the patriarchy and her father, et cetera, et cetera. That's not the show. The show's smarter than that and more interesting than that and more complicated than that. And Shiv is no less an empty suit than the rest of them. She has fully decoupled from whatever tangential connection she had to the real world and thrown herself completely into the beast for no real end, I think, other than this abstract concept of power or proving herself to her father. And it's been interesting watching purpose slip through her fingers, because I think when we met her in season 1, she had at least with the appearance of some insight, some political point of view, or some savvy. She had existed outside of the company. So that's what the, what was it, Eves, the Eric Bogosian's character.
The Bernie Sanders stand-in,
The Bernie Sanders stand-in looked to her for, right? Again, you could also now watch those episodes in retrospect and be like, another father figure was using her as a, he thought that was delicious that he had a Roy, the black sheep Roy family advising him, et cetera, et cetera. But clearly she had something. When you align yourself to Logan as the North Star, they're actually, you just tumble into space at that point. Everything you're holding is ephemeral, and everything is about performance and positioning, et cetera, et cetera. And the emptiness of her current life was really striking, not only from her sort of Pyrrhic victories that happened throughout the episode, but also the other things that happened around them. For example, that kind of devastating cut back to the conference room where you see the 3 women in the cast in a pre-filmed EPK talking about how Waystar values women.
Yes.
Down to the moment when we find out that Tom is tracking her menstrual cycle in order to implant her with a young whamscam heir, and once again, from those she is supposed to love or supposed to love her, she's a object. She's a placeholder.
The previous episode, Kendall called her a dipshit. In this episode, Connor referred to her as a fake, I believe. She has, repeatedly over the course of this season sought out some kind of partnership, whether it was with Tom when she was like, I love you. And Tom's like, that's nice. And when she goes to Lisa Arthur, played by Sanaa Lathan, who we haven't really seen in a couple of episodes, when she goes to her and is just like, I could use you as my counsel, as like an independent sort of voice. And she's like, I'm with Kendall. She obviously tries to kind of attach herself to her dad and get this inside track to the top of the company. And the thing that Logan seems to reject most strongly over and over again is anybody wanting anything from him. So it's really like when Roman offers up Jerry, when Shiv is like, this is my board seat, when Kendall is trying to get what he wants, that's how you never get anywhere with Logan that way as a character.
It's worth asking, reframing the question you brought up at the beginning, which is the kind of tired question that is always, hanging around the show like a dead cat under Logan's chair, which is, are these good people? I think a more interesting question for where we are in the third season is, are they good at anything?
Yeah.
Like, what are they actually good at?
Yeah.
The people who have survived within the power circle of the company are super good at eating shit. That's what they're good at. And pivoting and placating. We get glimpses of Roman being kind of good at some things, of being
I think he's
clever
efficient.
or charming or capable or efficient, or at least being able to use his rapier wit to cut through some of the bullshit. Kendall seems to have the right brain for business. He just doesn't have, like, he understands what's going on, you know, to a degree the rest of them don't, and seems animated by it, but he doesn't have the killer instinct, as we, as Logan has often told him. What does Siobhan have? And I think there, what could be interesting about the show is that character heading for a kind of existential crisis, the likes of which we haven't seen on the show, and the likes of which would definitely not be welcomed by the Roy family, because, well, Connor is also, completely out of it. He's delusional.
They just kind of bring him off the bench for like 5 minutes a game, and then he's just like, he just says something really funny and asks for a new job, and then is I enjoy that aspect of Alan Ruck's character. It is interesting though to think about Shiv and Rome and Shiv and Kendall are the two characters that I think are the most in some ways ashamed to be Roy's, like they want to be known for something either individual or something perhaps more ethical or moral than what the Roy family is typically known for. It's important to Shiv that her hands are clean when it comes to a lot of the DOJ investigation stuff. Kendall obviously wants to be this tech bro. Roman has no airs about him about that. You know what I mean? Like, Roman will blow up a satellite and be like, we'll fix this. Like, Roman doesn't have any shame. And that's why everybody in the room is like, well, Roman should get on the call with the president. He's Logan Jr.
That's interesting. And I think you're right. Something else that was really highlighted for me this episode, this has been there the whole time, but I was just thinking about it, was the generational divide and how devastating it is. A lot of people spent their We Don't Have Succession this year, Shelter in Place year, rewatching The Sopranos. And so many of those people will remember kind of Tony's existential observation, right? That he feels like he got in at the end of something.
Yeah.
That it was something that was good when his father was doing it. And now it's really just picking up the scraps and, shutting up the theater and locking it behind him. Like it's over, and he can't shake that feeling. And that was a pretty powerful statement about the state of our country 20 years ago, before I think it became more actualized and real to everyone in their life, that maybe something is a little awry here and we can't quite put our finger on where and when it happened. All of that is a kind of a long preamble to say how old the older generation on this show is.
Ken's
don't get me started
40.
on how old our leadership in this country is, or the fact that casting older people in the older generation is partly intentional because Kendall is because Jeremy Strong is over 40 and Kieran Culkin's actually about to turn 40, even though they play younger, et cetera, et cetera. But like, I sent this to you earlier in the week. David Rashi, first of all, been mispronouncing his name my entire life.
Me too. Don't worry about it.
Shouts to Google.
Shouts
David
to
Rashi.
Shouts to Sledgehammer. Yeah.
God, that show is important to me. Did you love that show? I
don't really remember anything about it other than the commercials.
I think that people listening who don't remember the kind of, it was this really satirical, like Naked Gun style parody of macho cop movies starring David Rashi in the 80s. I loved it. Anyway, he's 77 years old.
No way.
Yes. He looks incredible. Yes. Isn't that wild?
Oh my God.
I know.
That is crazy.
Brian
How
Cox
old's Cox?
He's 72 or something.
Okay.
I think he's only, he's not that much senior to Alan
But he's
Ruck,
got the
which is crazy.
urethra of a 59-year-old.
and dropping or rising, unclear. And Peter Friedman, I think his name is, who plays Frank. I mean, these guys, they're in their 70s, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they are. It's this fascinating thing where, like in this country, when you have power, you're not going to relinquish it. That's just central, and it's also one of the reasons why we're a decaying empire. But also, they're still playing yesterday's game because it works for them. This idea that Siobhan is going to be like, yes, I'm the new millennial face of the fucking Brontosaurus. What? That's why low-key one of the funniest things about the show always is when they talk about their plans of what they're going to do. They rat-tat-tat it always, right? We're going to buy this. They make up some new word for Google. We're going to do this. We're going to pivot to digital. We're going to blah, blah, blah. It's all nonsense. It's all shareholder placating nonsense, because what you want to do is you just want to keep mining coal, basically, from the back of your dinosaur like Fred Flintstone. Like, That's what all this is for.
It's really interesting that you bring up the Sopranos thing, because I hadn't really thought about that. And, there's a lot of conversations this season in the show where, Kendall will say to Josh, like, the comet is coming, or the great whites are moving off of stage. That whole pitch that he gives the kids in his daughter's bedroom, where he's just like, we denationalize, like, we decouple from America. We decouple, like,
all the
it's
Kendall
just
stuff.
like in the Sopranos. And I think up until, in a lot of ways, I would say at least in my experience, like up until the housing crisis in 2008, where I think that was when I first became familiarized with the idea of that you could bet on something to lose, or that there were people who might profit from something collapsing, and that these moments of crisis were actually beneficial to people.
The capitalism may have incentivized a lack of collective spirit.
Right. And so there's no melancholy to this. It's like there's melancholy in The Sopranos. He's remembering like a country and a community and a way of life, even if it's, debatable to what extent that was what he thinks it was. There's a sense of loss there. Succession is very much the antidote to that, because they're saying, we actually see opportunity where everything collapses. We only see opportunity when there's crisis, when there's polarization, when there's anger, when there's perhaps we've basically talked our way out of this president. We'll get a new one, like all that stuff. And that's what Kendall kind of represents too. Is so Shiv and Kendall, they're not like white knights. They're janitors kind of.
Yeah. And ultimately it's not about the money. It's about, as they said in this episode in relation to the president, it's about the access. It's about being inside the room. Like Greg is a punchline when he's still suckling at the same money teat. As soon as that is cut off, he's just a punchline.
Yeah.
He's just a loser. He's just a dork. And, that was kind of the case with Kendall too. At the end of this episode, I thought, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, when he takes the stage to try to milk, I'm sorry with all these milk metaphors. I really apologize.
That's okay. It's been an early day for you on the farm.
I've been drinking nothing but cranberry juice to deal with other issues, and I guess I'm eager for something else. When he takes the stage to do one of his now,
his viral
performative
moments.
bits, it rang super hollow. I mean, they were always hollow, but nobody was there for it. Nobody was interested in it, and they cut off his mic, and it's like, you had a moment when people were looking at you and talking about you, and if you cut that off, you cut off your access, you cut off the microphone, you cut off the money train. Like what?
Yeah,
it's
you think about
pathetic.
how different that scene at the end of this past episode is shot versus the press conference. The press conference has all these people waiting with bated breath. The cameras are clicking. It's close up. Kendall has done he's surprised everyone. This is just like, I just want to come out, and then he's doing the most like the tiredest tropes of grandstanding and virtue signaling by being like, I'm starting a foundation. Here are the names we must not forget. It's just like, it's such bullshit coming from him.
The way, among the many pros of COVID, but like the one way that I think it has potentially helped the season is the way it causes us to view the bubbles the characters are in. Mm-hmm. Kendall has his little bubble. He's got Jess and he's got the internet ladies to tell him he's doing okay and that he's doing a fine job. But it's,
It's cracking a little bit though. You see Jess roll her eyes when the rabbit eats the bagel, and she's just like, "This guy's an idiot." Like most people starting to think he is one. You know?
Yeah, I loved it. Was a throwaway line, but when he was angry about the rabbit, and he was just like, "Call our doctor."
Yeah,
like that is such typical alpha bullshit. Yeah. Like his angry baby brain was like, me put stick in fire. Like I will show you fire, but it's like that's.
Imagine being that doctor and the two calls you get are about like a giant rabbit who's eaten overdosed on bagel, and also this guy's father who's gotten piss mad. Should we talk about piss madness?
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple questions. I didn't. You may have watched the episode more times than I have, so I didn't really track the TikTok of. Pillgate was confusing to me.
Sure. So Carrie, who's his assistant, like she's like, here are your pills. Right. Basically in the beginning of the episode.
A lot of no free ads, but Advil gets some shine in this episode. Yeah. And look, I don't feel like it's bad if you promote products you love. Like I've been known to pop an Advil now and again. You know what I mean? Like it is a magical elixir.
You know, like you're not a Bayer guy. Do people take Bayer still?
I think as a blood thinner.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Can I small digression here?
Please, I'm waiting. I want it.
I always like to find my way in to relate to these characters, and I guess what I was missing was the part where Carrie was like, "Do you have your pills?" Because he did have some antibiotic or something for this UTI he seems to have developed by walking around in the sun at Josh's Island or whatever. Yeah. Unclear. But all I heard, the little clarion call to my ears, was Advil. Now, as I alluded, I have taken my fair share of the little brown guys in my life.
Sure.
Maybe, it's anti-inflammatory, so maybe you've got a fever or something.
Two things you deal with quite often.
Totally. Here's something though. I don't know if this was getting older or the amount of running I'm doing now, but like the other week when I ran 12 miles and my legs were like, nope, that's it. We are on strike. We are done. We're going to cause you pain now. Should you use us? I was like, oh gosh, have I done something? Have I injured myself? And I was like, well, I'll start small, So I shake the bottle, 2 Advils. Dude, I was like in episode 3 of Dope Sick. When you use them the way they are intended to be used, I was dancing on the table like Dick Van Dyke at the end of Mary Poppins Returns. What do you mean intended
to be used? Like in bulk?
No, just like
when you're in pain. Yeah.
I feel like maybe I've never actually needed medication before because I've lived a charmed and healthy life. But like I physically exerted myself and my bones and muscles were aching because they were inflamed. I took an over-the-counter medication and I was like, did the Sackler family invent this? I'm going to run 12 more miles. This shit works. So all of this is to say, I feel like they could have knocked out the UTI if they had given him 20 more minutes. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like don't sell that shit short.
Yeah.
That's my monologue for
You're
this week.
basically here to stump for big Advil against antibiotics is what you're saying.
Ibuprofen, ibuprofen. That's what I have to say.
I just didn't know UTIs had that effect on older folks. That piss mad is a very evocative term.
Did you Google it? I wouldn't.
I did. And I'm sorry to say that.
Is your computer on fire now?
This is the last I'll be using this computer. I have to throw it in the LA River next. This episode is brought to you by Mint Mobile. New Year's resolutions are fun the first couple of weeks. Then you kind of maybe conveniently forget about them halfway through January. No shame. It happens to us all. But this year I have a foolproof plan, at least when it comes to saving money. Just switch to Mint Mobile and you're done. Goal accomplished, because for a limited time, their wireless plans are $15 a month when you buy a 3-month plan. The great thing about Mint Mobile is there's no jaw-dropping monthly bills or unexpected overages, and all plans come with unlimited talk and text. Get this new customer offer today at mintmobile.com/watch. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. So yeah, like I thought that plotline was interesting too. They've definitely made Logan rather infirm these last 2 episodes. They've really started to lessen him physically, and it was interesting watching Roman be the only one who was concerned about his health. Like Roman repeatedly throughout the episode is just like the most important thing is what Dad would have wanted, what Dad would say, what would dad want? Don't go back on what dad said. And then it's like, he's the fucking bull. He knows what to do. And when everybody else is like, well, should we call and, renege on this deal? He's like, how about we just care about like what's going on with him? It was kind of like it's so funny to watch them evoke these, or not even evoke, like pull these characteristics out of characters subtly, because they're happening while this 3-ring circus of jokes is happening.
It's the saddest emotion for me in the show, that at his broken core, Roman just wants more time with his dad.
Mm-hmm.
And the saddest part hiding behind that already sad part is it's because if he had spent more time with him, he'd know who he really was.
Sure.
Like that's the trickle down that we see when Kendall's like to Siobhan, it's you now,
mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry. They were the heat shield protecting Roman without realizing he was being protected. And all that's left him with is this like giant maw of wanting, and it plays out. I mean, this was every actor on the show is sneaky good all the time. But I would say this was a sneaky great Kieran Culkin episode for what he had to convey while still being this affected character.
His physical discomfort at watching Sandy, his physical discomfort being on the phone with the president, that was hilarious. He was like, how you doing? And then he's just like, fuck. And then there's just that subtle, like after Siobhan gets kind of rejected by Logan at the end of the episode, he just kind of kneels down at his dad's side and is like, we fucking did it, huh? Like that was a close one. And it's, you could track that in gender roles, but you could also just see like, he's the one who his only concern is Logan in that sense. And it's not really about becoming CEO for him.
Let me check in with the concern troll under the bridge that we haven't jumped off yet.
What's up with him? Is he doing chin-ups and reading Ausgard? What's going on with him?
He's reading.
You should have a voice. You should have a voice for this guy at this point.
He finished My Struggle, all the volumes, and now he's reading Nausgaard's new novel, which he has a lot of thoughts about. Have we done all this before?
Yeah.
Is there treadmill fatigue at this point in the show, when I do believe part of what interests and motivates Jesse Armstrong is how cyclical and back scratching and back slapping and circular, like all of this is. It all just keeps happening again until it doesn't, right? Like I think we were saying this last week. I don't think he or anyone involved in the writing of the show is actually interested in what Waystar looks like after a succession has been enacted.
Mm-hmm.
This is not, to my eyes, and I could very well be wrong about this, I don't think there's a Kendall's finally got the big chair season. Let's see what he does.
No,
with
I don't think we're gonna get like a lot of like what are the suite of websites Kendall is unveiling.
It's about this feud that is the death throes of a media titan, I think,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the end of individually and the company. So with all that being said, though, that sense of this is D-Day, everything is on the line today, and then it works out. Logan is infirm. Logan is unwell. He'll be fine with some fluids.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're off to the races again. I thought this episode was so, theatrically and well staged. I want to be very clear. I am not actually voicing the opinion that I'm tired of it yet.
You're just a courier.
I'm just aware.
The concern troll's thoughts. He shared them with you and you're bringing them to us.
I guess what I'll say is I'm aware of it.
Mm-hmm. I think the show is. I mean, what does Logan says like before he goes piss mad? He's like, we could have done this deal in Greece. He says like,
right.
They've been talking about this since the last third of the second season. Now, I think part of the reason why sometimes it doesn't always track is that I think there's a fair amount that's now happening in between episodes. Like we aren't getting like after the first few episodes were essentially a 3-hour movie in terms of press conference. Second, the third season starts immediately after the press conference.
Right.
I think the second episode starts immediately as Shiv makes the U-turn to go towards Kendall's house. The second episode starts. So there's been no time in between. And now in this one, obviously there has been some sort of fallout from Logan's experience out on Josh's island. And I don't think we had seen or heard about negotiations between Sandy and Stewie and the Roy family really that gets mentioned a little bit in the last episode, but it's obviously something where they're like, well, we're close to a deal. We're so close to a deal. I'm like, I thought you guys fucking hated each other and everything was coming down to a vote. So that stuff can be a little murky sometimes.
All the money that both sides have reportedly spent on whipping up a vote or, trying to predict the vote. Also, the ATN's pivot to take down the president, that didn't happen overnight. I think you make a good point. One of the things that that I remember noticing in the first season was that, I think Succession, to my mind, was really the first Prestige era show since Mad Men to so fully take its time. I think that, I don't know whether it was Breaking Bad broke our brain in this regard, but there was, to my mind anyway, and it was also the nature of the story, but I kind of got lulled into an expectation that episodes were essentially picking up where the last one left off. Maybe that day or two has passed, but whatever the plot is so breakneck that we have to get right back into it. And I remember watching that first season where I was like, oh, now it's Thanksgiving. Oh, okay. And I appreciated that about the show. And I think that you're really right to point out that this is kind of a return to that type of storytelling. And I think it suits it, frankly.
Yeah, there's also there are beats to certain Succession inter-character interactions. Like every time Kendall and Stewie see one another, he walks in and Stewie's like, oh, I thought you'd be on a rainbow box talking about Time's Up. He always is your dad's Sherpa. Busts his chops for a second. And then Kendall's like, I can do this, man. And Stewie's like, fuck off. And then he's like, no, but you need me. And Stewie's like, good point. You know what I mean? It's not I don't really ever think anything has been changed as much as these people are all trapped with one another, and maybe we're trapped with these people.
Yeah, if we ever get Arian Moayed on the show, there was a moment in this episode where Stewie's left hanging, and there was more script written. Because Stewie, I can't imagine a Succession script ever ends with Stewie staring off into the middle distance. I feel like it's too great to give him something to clap back.
Yeah.
But yeah, they had to continually make these aggressive runs and pullbacks. You have to have Kendall had to have a reason to run into that room. And I actually enjoyed it more this time than in the past interactions, because there was such a sense of actual in their bodies chaos that they usually don't let anyone see, where it's just they're just shouting, you don't belong here, you don't belong here. That
good
was
day. It's yeah.
Good day.
It was please leave.
I mentioned him already. I want to give shouts to Peter Friedman because I thought this was a great Frank episode.
Yeah. It's a vamp.
I mean, just vamping like that. One thing I hope that Succession never does, and I think that they are just far too smart to do it, is we should never, ever, ever, ever go home with Frank or Carl or Jerry. Because that the whole point is that
I don't even like knowing that she has daughters.
No. None of this is worth it. And so if we see more plainly the justifications and deals they strike with themselves, if we see that Frank just owns a building in the West Village and maybe loves the theater and his night off, and this is what he has to do all day to have his happy time, then what's the point? I think the whole idea is that you sign up for this, you jump on the merry-go-round thinking you'll take a few turns around, you'll grab the brass ring, and then you get to have a brass ring. That's just not what this is. This goes on forever.
So what would you, are you looking for a solution in that regard? Or, the funny thing is that we're only halfway through the season. I think because we talk about it so much and because we've been anticipating the season for so long, it's we're only midway through, so a lot can happen. There's still a couple of guest stars that have been announced that are showing up in the rest of the season. But yeah, there definitely seemed to be some finality, the blocking of Kendall on the phone being you are now, now that we have secured this company, I no longer need to even think about this.
Yeah, in a way, this felt like the finale of the mini season that began at the end of last season. That there's a 6-episode arc that begins on the yacht and in many ways ends here. So what I'm curious about is, what is the show now? Obviously, there are many things still in play. The rupture within the family still matters. The government stuff is now, I would imagine, ready to take center stage. But not to get too cute or too meta about it, but what is the vision for the company going forward?
Yeah.
In this case, the company being the show. I thought it was really noteworthy, and I'm glad you circled back to it, that the Kendall thing is performance. and was treated as such by Logan, who couldn't care less about the actual emotional fallout, needed him to be what he needed him to be on the tarmac or with Josh or as a foil or as whatever. And he secured his company. And now it doesn't matter anymore. So what is it now?
Did you necessarily believe the PR team when they were like, oh, this is actually playing really well? Or is it that's the actual...
To Kendall, his team?
Yeah, is that the sort of satire of that, is that even if it plays well, you still lose? Like the idea that these things actually have like an impact or these kinds of gestures can change anything?
I think that I'm on record with my thoughts on what Twitter opinion is worth. You know, I mean, that's they're scouring his Menchies and being like, some people think that was a good thing. Okay.
What else? What else should we talk about? I mean, Greg obviously losing out on the inheritance. I think we talked about that. Did you have like any thoughts about like Tom being like, I really want to like make sure the line continues and I want to have something to look forward to when I get out of jail? Because chin ups in NASCAR does sound like a pretty cool vacation.
Tom, I mean, Matthew McFadden's performance is so good, and this sense that you get from it that he thought he was in the penthouse and now he's just sliding down the side of a glass skyscraper and he can't grab onto anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's phenomenal performance. It's also that deep feeling of like, what are we actually doing? What do we actually have and hold here? And for him, it was, you know, promotions and money and stature, but it was also, at least the way he imagined it, some sort of emotional connection. He was married, you know, he knows that Logan is very unwell, but he still takes the moment to relish calling him Papa. You know, he wants to be married into this family. And so it was kind of great the way that relationship has devolved so staggeringly that it's now, even that piece of it is transactional. And Siobhan almost, you know, seems offended, but there's nothing in that suggestion that runs afoul of anything her family has done in the past. I mean, that's exactly how they think about all family transactions.
Yeah.
You know, that it makes total sense. I did want to, before we move past it, go back to the Greg thing briefly, just to say the constant underlining of people taking Greg lightly, not taking him seriously, telling him to like get some stones and step up. It's a pretty steady drumbeat, you know, and I only hope, and I have no reason to doubt, that when the writers do nudge him into more action, which seems inevitable,
sure,
that it will be as farcical as everything else that he does in ways that feel appropriate.
A la his congressional testimony.
Yeah, I'm not really ready for, you know, him to pull off the mask and he's Icarus from the Eternals. You know what I mean? Like ready to rain laser fire down on everyone.
I don't think that's coming. I think that's a guy. The inheritance thing is something I had sort of forgotten about. I don't really know that I had thought about like, oh, this guy is going to get rich off of his grandfather. I thought he was always just like, oh, this would be great if I could get a job or something like that. But it explains a little bit more about like his behavior, I think, over the last season and a half, if you know he's kind of like maybe going to come into some of Ewan's money. We can wrap it up there. It was great talking to you, man, about Succession, as it is always. We'll be back on Thursday to chat about some other shows. We were produced by Kai McMullen this week, as always.
Do you want to make any more like piss mad jokes? Any other things you want to?
I think I said piss mad half a dozen times, and
you said it so many times.
You didn't. It's not like you cackled with joy. So I maybe it was. I don't know.
Maybe I've missed an opportunity.
Do you have some piss madness in your like distant family that you want to talk about?
It haunts me. The family curse.
Uncle Barry, the piss mad king.
That's what Dane Whitman wanted to say to Cersei at the end of Eternals.
You're still thinking about Eternals. Is that is that what this is about? Is that where you're just mad that we're not talking about Eternals?
I want to make another run at that apple. I don't feel like I got it yet. You know, if there's one tortured, power mad family that is consuming me, it's definitely not the Roys this week.
I love it. Well, maybe we could talk more about Eternals on Thursday. Until then, Andy was...
Or not. Have a nice Sunday night, everyone.
Talk to you guys later.